The human body contains 206 bones. Thomas Hale learned this not from any book, but from counting. By the spring of 1847, he had counted the bones of 17 people, some whole, others fragmented by time in the Georgia soil that tried and failed to guard its secrets. On the evening of March 11, 1847, a stranger rode onto Belmonte Plantation with a leather satchel and a letter whose wax seal had been broken once and clumsily resealed. The overseer, Mr. Dalton, escorted him straight to the main house, bypassing the usual questioning at the gate. Thomas was pruning hedges near the entrance when they passed. The stranger moved with the weariness of long travel, yet his boots carried only the dust of a single day's ride. The mismatch made Thomas pause, shears motionless in his hands. The man introduced himself as Mr. Edmund Voss, a lawyer from Savannah, though his accent held traces of somewhere farther north. He had come, he told Colonel William Fairburn, about an inheritance dispute and a contested piece of land that bordered Belmonte's eastern edge. The colonel received him in the study. Thomas, assigned to bring refreshments, caught fragments through the half-open door. The deceased left no valid will, Voss explained, but there were irregularities in the 1839 land transfer, questions about how the property changed hands. Colonel Fairburn answered evenly, deliberately. "I bought that land lawfully, Mr. Voss. Every paper was correctly recorded." Of course. Still, the deceased's nephew is challenging it. He claims undue influence surrounded the sale. The prior owner, Mr. Gerard Finch, died quite abruptly soon afterward. Thomas's hand faltered slightly as he poured water into the crystal tumbler. He knew the name Gerard Finch. He knew precisely where Gerard Finch lay buried. Later that night, after Voss had been given a guest room and the colonel had withdrawn, Thomas stood in the doorway of his cabin in the quarters, gazing across Belmonte's dark expanse. The plantation covered 200 acres of Georgia cottonland. Even at night, the broad fields felt vast and empty beneath the stars. But Thomas wasn't studying the fields. His eyes followed unseen lines across the landscape, connecting 17 points only he could see. The first grave was chance. At 12, newly bought and brought to Belmonte from an Augusta auction, he'd been separated from his mother, the not knowing still a hollow ache inside him. Digging fence post holes near an old magnolia on the property's far fringe, his shovel hit something neither rock nor root. He uncovered the bones slowly, quietly, then covered them again. Even at 12, he understood a hidden grave signaled danger. Someone had concealed what they did not want found. What stayed with him wasn't the skeleton itself, but the iron key ring with 7 keys he found among the remains, rusted yet solid. He hid it in a tin box under his cabin's floorboard. He couldn't say why, perhaps because it was the first real choice he'd made since arriving at Belmonte, to keep something that belonged to the dead. Thomas was 31 in the spring of 1847, though the plantation ledger listed him as 28. Such small errors were routine, enslaved people's birth dates were seldom noted accurately. He had lived at Belmonte 19 years, longer than anyone else still there. Longevity like that drew suspicion. Belmonte was known for quick turnover. People were often sold south, the phrase used whenever someone vanished, deeper into Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, places whispered about as the final circle of hell. But Thomas had learned that not everyone who left Belmonte ever reached another plantation. The second grave appeared 5 years after the first. At 17, doing drainage work after heavy rains, he saw a skull exposed in an eroded ditch bank. In pre-dawn dark, he reburied it deeper, weighting the spot with stones and brush. The skull bore a clear fracture from a heavy, deliberate strike. After that, he began to watch, never obviously, never drawing notice, but with the patient attention of a man who knew information was the only power he could hold. Repairing fences, he noted freshly turned soil. Gathering firewood in the woods, he marked subtle depressions. During building projects, he observed ground that had been opened and closed again. By 1847, he had located 17 secret burials, 17 people hidden away from any churchyard or proper marker, 17 lives erased without explanation. He remembered their names. Sarah, house servant who saw something in the colonel's study, gone in 1842, sold to Mobile, they said. Thomas found her near the dismantled old stable. Marcus, accused of stealing, whipped, then vanished. He ran, they claimed. Thomas located him under the new tobacco barns foundation laid in 1839. Eliza, who nursed Mrs. Fairburn through her fatal fever in 1840, disappeared 3 weeks after the funeral, sold south. Thomas found her half a mile past the eastern line, in the woods. And Gerard Finch, not enslaved, but the white landowner whose acres the colonel had taken. His grave was easiest to find, because Thomas had helped dig the deep foundation for the rebuilt spring house on that newly acquired land. Even then he understood what they were truly burying. Now Edmund Voss had arrived, inquiring about Gerard Finch and the 1839 sale. This was peril of a different kind. Secrets 8 years buried were being disturbed. On Voss's second day, Thomas was ordered to accompany the lawyer during his survey of the eastern boundary. The colonel insisted, ostensibly for the guest's safety, though Thomas recognized it as surveillance. Voss studied papers, paused to measure with brass compass and chain. Thomas carried the satchel and tools, keeping 3 paces back. "You've been at Belmonte a long while," Voss remarked without turning. "Yes, sir." "You knew the previous owner here, Mr. Finch." "I saw him now and then, sir, when he was living." "What sort of man was he?"
"I couldn't rightly say, sir. Never spoke with him." Voss stopped, turned, met Thomas's eyes. "The records show Mr. Finch sold to Colonel Fairburn in July 1839, then died 3 weeks later in a riding accident. Unfortunate timing." Thomas kept his face blank, gaze sliding past Voss's shoulder. "I wouldn't know, sir." "No, I suppose not." Voss walked on, but a note in his voice suggested he knew more than he said. They reached the old spring house, rebuilt in 1839, now half fallen and unused. Voss circled it, studying the deep foundation. Curious, they rebuilt this instead of simply putting the new one closer to the house as they eventually did. Thomas said nothing. His pulse had quickened, though his breathing stayed even. Voss crouched, touched the stones. Very deep foundation for so modest a building. He stood, dusted his hands, and continued along the line. Thomas followed, clutching the satchel harder than necessary. That evening, Thomas spoke quietly with Isaiah, one of the oldest men on the place, 60s, one eye clouded from an old injury, at Belmonte since 1826, 2 years before Thomas arrived. They met between Isaiah's cabin and the water barrel, conversation masked as routine fetching. "You recall when they rebuilt the spring house on the Finch land?" Thomas asked low. Isaiah's good eye settled on him. "The one they later abandoned?" "Yes, I remember." "Anything else from that time?" Isaiah paused. "Mr. Finch visited the colonel once, voices raised in the study. After that, he never came back." "Who worked on the rebuilding?" Isaiah's face stayed still, but something shifted. "Some of those men ain't here no more, Thomas. You're asking questions with answers that bite. I'm trying to see what's coming. What's coming is what always comes. White men argue, other people vanish. Ground gets opened, then closed. We stay alive by not asking what's underneath." Thomas took that in. "The lawyer here, I see how the colonel watches him. That man's digging up more than boundary lines. Be careful you ain't standing too near when the weight shifts." The chance arrived on the 3rd evening. After supper and brandy in the study, Voss left his satchel beside his chair. Thomas, tending fire and glasses, stayed near invisible. Conversation grew sharp. "I'll speak plainly, Colonel. My client believes his uncle was pressured into selling. Witnesses claim Mr. Finch never meant to part with the land." "Witnesses?" The colonel's voice turned cold. People who knew him, people who heard him speak of threats after visiting Belmonte. 3 weeks later, he's dead, thrown from a steady horse on a familiar road. Accidents happen, Mr. Voss, even to skilled riders. When the accident is convenient, questions follow. The colonel leaned in. What exactly are you accusing me of? I accuse nothing. I investigate. If the sale was coerced, it's void, and the land returns to the Finch estate. You have no evidence of wrongdoing.
Not yet. Voss gave a small smile. But I researched thoroughly. Tension thickened the air. Thomas moved silently, aware he was witnessing something that could ignite. After the colonel retired and Voss left for his room, Thomas made a choice that could end him. He entered the study. The satchel remained. Hands trembling, he opened it. Legal papers, letters, a journal, a slim notebook. His reading was halting, learned in secret years before, but he recognized names: Finch, Fairburn, Belmonte. Then a list: names, dates, notations, whereabouts unknown. Sarah, 1842, Marcus, 1839, Eliza, 1840. Others he knew, not all 17, but enough. Voss wasn't only probing a land deal, he was tracing disappearances. Thomas replaced everything precisely and slipped away, mind spinning. Voss was dangerous, not like the colonel, but because he unearthed truths that could bring unpredictable consequences. Next morning, Thomas saw Hatch, the colonel's guard, ride toward the eastern boundary. Hatch returned within the hour, boots muddied near the old spring house. That afternoon, Voss announced he would depart the following day, satisfied with his survey. But that night, Thomas couldn't rest. The colonel had been too calm at dinner, too pleasant. Voss seemed almost light-hearted. Something was wrong. At midnight, Thomas moved through the sleeping quarters to the main house. A lamp glowed in the study window. Creeping close, he saw the colonel writing at his desk, with a pistol resting beside the paper. Thomas understood instantly. Voss might leave in the morning, but would he reach Savannah, or would another accident claim him? Warning Voss meant death if caught. Even success might mean death for betrayal. No path let Thomas live if he acted. Yet 17 graves existed because no one had spoken. No one had risked anything to halt the next one. He thought of the key ring hidden 19 years. 7 keys. Now he knew where at least some fit. He retrieved them from beneath the floorboard and glided to the house. The study's side door, used for business callers, yielded to the second key. Moonlight gave enough light. Thomas went to the tall cabinet the colonel always locked. The third key turned. Inside, ledgers. Thomas could read numbers better than words. One column showed ordinary expenses. Another, in different ink, listed names and dates beside special payments. Gerard Finch's name appeared, with a sum dated a week after his supposed death. There were letters, deeds, agreements. At the cabinet's bottom sat a small wooden box. The 5th key opened it. Women's jewelry, rings, brooches, a locket. Inside the locket, a miniature portrait of a young woman, a curl of hair, inscription, "To Eliza with devotion," signed G.F. Gerard Finch loved Eliza, or at least cared deeply. When Finch died, the colonel took the land, the enslaved people, everything, including Eliza. Then she vanished. The picture sharpened. The colonel had killed Finch for the property, then silenced anyone who knew or might speak: Eliza, Sarah, Marcus, others. The ledger's special payments were hush money, or wages for help, or costs to erase problems. Thomas held proof of years of murder, proof that could hang the colonel, but proof he could never present. He was property, not a person under law. Footsteps sounded in the hall. Thomas froze. The door handle turned. He shut the box, closed the cabinet, and slipped behind the heavy window curtains. The colonel entered with a candle, went straight to the cabinet, took the wooden box using his own key, looked at it with an expression Thomas couldn't quite name, regret mixed with decision, then left. Thomas waited until silence returned, relocked everything, and escaped to his cabin. He sat, holding the keys, knowing the colonel was readying to eliminate Voss and perhaps others. At first light, Thomas approached Voss as the lawyer readied his horse. Voss was humming, seemingly unconcerned. "Mr. Voss, sir," Thomas said softly. Voss turned. "Yes?" Thomas checked for watchers. "It ain't safe, sir. The road you're taking?" Voss's face sharpened. "What do you mean?" "Danger, sir. Don't take the main road. There's a back way, through the Miller place east. Longer, but it joins the Savannah route without the lonely stretch." "Why tell me this?" Thomas met his eyes, a direct breach of every rule. "Because too many are already buried here, sir. I don't want another." Voss studied him, then nodded slowly. "I see." He wrote quickly on a paper, folded. "If I don't reach Savannah, this must reach the sheriff in Augusta. Can you get it there somehow?" "I can't leave, sir, but peddlers pass through. I'll try." "What's your name?" "Thomas Hale, sir." "You're a brave man, Thomas Hale, braver than most. I'm just tired of counting graves." After Voss left, taking the back road, Thomas worked through the day, nerves tight. The colonel grew irritable, pacing. By afternoon, word came Voss hadn't appeared on the expected route. The plan had failed. That night, Hatch came to the cabin. "Colonel wants you. Main house, now." In the study, the colonel sat with the pistol near his hand again. "You've been here a long time, Thomas." "Yes, sir." "You see things, hear things."
"I don't hear nothin', sir. Don't see nothin'. Ain't my place." "That's what I've always valued, your discretion." The colonel lifted the pistol idly. "Mr. Voss asked you questions on the boundary walk?" "Only about measurements, sir." "Nothing about people who used to be here? People who left?" "No, sir." The colonel watched him closely. Thomas held the blank mask he'd worn for 19 years. "I wonder how Mr. Voss knew to change his route this morning. I wonder who might have suggested the back road, where the road can be treacherous." Thomas stayed silent. "You're valuable, Thomas. You know every acre, every building," the colonel smiled thinly, "every patch of earth that's been turned and smoothed again." It was the closest the colonel had come to admitting what Thomas knew. The openness meant Thomas's life was forfeit. "I just know where I'm told to work, sir." "You've done plenty of digging over the years." The colonel stood, stepped close. "I think it's time for a change. Tomorrow you're going south. I've arranged the sale. Mississippi. Hatch will take you to the trader in Augusta at dawn. Settle your things tonight." Thomas returned to his cabin. He wouldn't reach Augusta. Somewhere along the road would come the escape attempt, the shot, the story. He would become Grave 18. But he knew it was coming. That was his single edge. He tore a strip from his blanket, drew, with charcoal, a rough map of Belmonte. 17 X's, each with a name beside it. Below, in careful, self-taught letters, "The Earth Remembers. Thomas Hale, 1847. He folded Voss's note inside, placed both in the tin box with the key ring, and went to Isaiah. "They're sending you away," Isaiah said. "Yes." "They ain't coming back." "No." Isaiah took the box. "What you need?" "When the peddler comes next week, the one who trades at Miller's, get this to him. Tell him it goes to the Augusta sheriff." "They'll kill me too if they find out." I know, I'm sorry, but you're older, less time left to lose, and maybe nothing changes, maybe more graves come, but at least we tried, at least someone spoke. Isaiah held the box. My son was Marcus. You knew? Thomas's chest tightened. I knew. That's why I counted, why I kept the names. They wanted forgetting. I couldn't let it happen. Where is he? North corner, under the tobacco barn. Isaiah shut his eyes. A tear tracked down. Thank you for remembering his name. They sat in silence, two men who had lost almost everything, yet still had this last thing to offer. Dawn came. Thomas stood ready with only the clothes he wore. Hatch waited on horseback, rifle ready. Simmons, the trader, had the wagon. They tied Thomas's hands, the usual precaution, and started for Augusta. The road wound through pine and red clay. Thomas watched the country pass, the mist, the forests, as if seeing it for the first time as a free man might. Midday they stopped to water the horses. Simmons stepped away. Hatch approached the wagon. You're calm, Hatch said. Most fight or cry. No use in either. Hatch lit a cigarette. Smart. I like that. You accept what is. He studied Thomas. The colonel says you've been talking, asking. I haven't asked nobody nothin'. Good. Questions about Belmonte get people gone. You've been the one making them gone a long time, haven't you? Hatch's smile vanished. His hand drifted to his knife. Careful. 17 graves. I found every one. I know who they were, where they lie. Then you're a fool for still breathing. That knowledge kills. I'm already dead. You're not taking me to Augusta. You're taking me to a quiet spot where I try to run and you shoot. Hatch didn't deny it. If you knew, why not run last night? Because running proves guilt. This way, when I'm gone, people might wonder why so many vanish from Belmonte. No one wonders about slaves vanishing. Maybe, but that lawyer wondered, and he ain't the last. Simmons returned. They moved on. In a dense forest stretch, Hatch halted. Wheel check. Thomas, get down. Help lift. Thomas climbed out, hands bound. This was the place. Hatch positioned him away from Simmons, hand on pistol. Nothing personal, business. Before he could raise it, hoofbeats sounded. 3 riders broke from the trees. One was Edmund Voss, pistol already leveled at Hatch. I wouldn't, Voss said evenly. With him, a sheriff's deputy and another man. What's this? Simmons demanded. An arrest, Voss answered. Mr. Hatch, you're detained for questioning in the murder of Gerard Finch and others.
Hatch paled. You can't. I'm transporting. You're transporting no one. Voss nodded to the deputy. Secure him. The deputy advanced with irons. Hatch glared at Thomas, fury blazing. You told him. I warned him, Thomas said. That's all. Voss dismounted, cut Thomas's ropes. Forgive the pretense, Thomas. I needed to see if the colonel would move against you as we feared. Your warning saved me and confirmed everything. I haven't been fully open either, Voss continued. Beyond the land, I've been looking into Belmonte for families whose kin vanished after arriving here. The third man stepped up. Thomas Hale, I'm William Chen, journalist from Boston. I've been tracing cases of murders masked as sales or runaways. Your information could open this wide. Thomas felt the ground tilt. Isaiah? The box? Safe, Voss said. We got it this morning. Your map, the names, the places, they match what we've gathered. What now? Now, Voss replied, we open every grave you marked. We charge Colonel Fairburn. The exhumations lasted 3 days. Thomas guided them to each site. 17 graves gave up 17 sets of remains. Enslaved people, free black individuals who had disappeared, and Gerard Finch. Trauma marks on skulls, scraps of clothing, personal items, all traceable.
Finch's signet ring his nephew recognized at once. Colonel Fairburn was arrested mid-exhumation. He protested innocence, slaves ran away, Finch's death was chance, but the ledger, recovered using Thomas's key, showed the pattern of payments and dates. Hatch, facing execution, turned state's witness, detailing 8 years of killings, silencing threats, covering fraud. The Augusta trial in October 1847 gripped the region. A prominent planter accused of serial murder, including a white man's, could not be hushed. William Chen's articles spread the account nationwide. Thomas testified. Standing in court, speaking truth to white men who held his fate, was terror itself. Yet he spoke steadily. Each grave, each name, each detail he had carried 19 years. The defense attacked. A slave's word was worthless, driven by spite or invention. But the bones lay where he said, the injuries matched, the timeline fit. On November 3, 1847, Colonel William Fairburn was convicted of murder, sentenced to hang. The verdict shook Georgia's planter class. If a man of wealth could fall partly on a slave's testimony and unearthed evidence, what else might surface? In December, Thomas stood in Belmonte's cemetery. 17 graves now bore simple stones, names at last spoken: Sarah, Marcus, Eliza, Gerard Finch. The rest, the enslaved had been sold for debts and fees. Isaiah had been bought by Pennsylvania Quakers who favored gradual freedom. They offered for Thomas too, but law delayed it. Voss joined him at the graves. The nephew takes both properties, Finch's and Belmonte, plans to sell Belmonte outright, wants no part of it. The people left? He'll sell only to families open to eventual manumission, not freedom yet, but a step. And me? Your testimony earns freedom, papers finalized next week. Thomas tested the word. Free. What will you do? Thomas looked at the stones. I counted graves because I couldn't save anyone, couldn't speak. Now he faced Voss. Mr. Chen wants to document other plantations, other missing. I'll help. I'll go where I'm needed, find what's hidden, speak for those who can't. Dangerous. I've lived dangerous 19 years. Now it'll mean something. Voss gave a faint smile. I thought you were a man who kept silent. I was wrong. You're the bravest I've met. I ain't brave. I was just tired of silence. Chen approached, notebook in hand. Thomas, this story isn't only murders or trial, it's memory. You remembered when others forgot. You mapped the disappeared. I did what had to be done. No, you did what almost no one would dare. You recorded horror when recording it was fatal. Because you did, justice became possible. Thomas gazed at the stones. It ain't enough. Justice for these 17 don't undo the system that made them. Don't free the thousands still in chains. Don't stop the next one. No, Chan agreed, but it's a beginning. Every name spoken, every grave marked, every story told, it weakens the foundation. Enough weakness and it crumbles. Thomas Hale's Freedom Papers were issued December 15, 1847. At 31, he legally owned himself for the first time. Over the next 13 years, he traveled the South with Chen and abolitionists, investigating vanishings, locating hidden burials. His evidence helped convict 3 more planters and revealed how often the enslaved who knew too much were quietly eliminated. He faced threats, 2 attempts on his life, a beating that left him limping forever. He continued. When war came in 1861, he joined the Union as scout and guide, his knowledge of land and hidden places priceless. War ended legal slavery, but not his work. During Reconstruction, he aided freed people in finding lost kin, marking graves, preserving names. Thomas Hale died in 1889, aged 73, buried in an Augusta cemetery. His stone read as he requested, "He remembered." Below, added by those who knew, "In memory of the 17 and all the countless others." Belmonte Plantation was never restored. The house fell to ruin. By the early 1900s, only foundations and the 17 marked graves remained. But the story endured. Chen's articles kept Thomas's words alive. Historians later pointed to Belmonte as stark proof that slavery rested on terror, erasure, and murder as much as on labor. The 17 graves became a quiet memorial, visited by those who wished to remember what was done, what was concealed, and what one man's refusal to look away had uncovered. Because Thomas Hale had seen not merely soil, but people. For 19 years he carried an invisible map of the lost, holding their names when records erased them. He witnessed when witnessing was lethal. He spoke when speech was forbidden. He remembered when memory was defiance. And the earth, as Thomas always understood it would be, eventually surrendered its secrets. It bore witness. It proved that some truths, no matter how deeply concealed, will eventually rise. Thomas Hale knew every hidden grave on Belmonte because he refused to turn his eyes away. Because he refused, 17 names returned from oblivion to the light of recognition. The graves were marked, the names were spoken, the dead were remembered.
And Thomas Hale, the enslaved man who became witness, voice, memorial, made certain the disappeared could never fully vanish, that the forgotten would be recalled, that the earth would tell its truth. In that small Georgia cemetery, beneath the words, "He remembered," rests a man who knew that memory is resistance, that naming is power, that bearing witness, even at ultimate cost, is perhaps the most human act of all. The 17 graves at Belmonte stand as proof not only of lives stolen, but of the one life that declined to forget.